Now, last week was Halloween, and if you've got any spooky portraits that you took of yourself or of a friend or something like that, we're going to look at how you can make them extra kind of spooky in Lightroom. Let's get into it. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, which is on every Tuesday. We bring a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, we're diving into Lightroom. We're going to make a little bit of a spooky portrait, even spookier, in Lightroom using lots of different techniques, a bit of color grading, some masking. We're going to get into all the different tools. Let's dive in. We're going to look at this photo. So as you can see, this is of someone in some makeup and costume, and it was all very exciting. But we're gonna make this a bit more atmospheric. We're gonna use masks and we're gonna use a little bit of color grading to really get this feeling the way we want it to feel. So let's start off by actually darkening this down a little bit. It's a little bit bright for what we want. We're also gonna go ahead and just up that contrast a little bit. I'm actually gonna bring the highlights up a bit and the shadows down, the blacks down a bit and the whites up. Something like that, I think, to start with. A little bit of clarity, a little bit of texture, some sort of basic stuff that we're going to do to try and get the overall photo where we want it to be. We can always see a before and after by pressing the / key on the keyboard. So just some pretty minor tweaks so far. I'm actually going to bring the saturation down a bit as well. Maybe the vibrance up just a touch. We're going to leave the tone curve for now. We're probably going to come back to that in a little bit. I think we're going to start playing around with, do you know what? Let's do some masking first. I think we've done the very basic stuff we want to do here. I think we can start playing around with the light a little bit. So let's bring in a linear gradient, something like this. This top part of the photo, I just want to make a little bit darker. So we're going to just go like that and just literally bring that exposure down, something a little bit like that. The next thing I want to do is bring in a radial gradient. This is a great way to make your subject pop a little bit. We're actually going to invert that. So we've got the radial gradient over her face here, but by inverting it, ticking this little box, we're now affecting everything outside. We've got it nicely feathered. So if we bring that exposure down, we're going to focus the light, the actual overall photo onto our subject's face there, which I think is ideal. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And actually, as a before and after, this is where we started. This is where we've got to. That's quite a significant difference already. That is actually somewhere you could leave it if you just wanted to play around with the light a little bit. I actually think that's quite nice. We're going to go a bit further. We're going to try and take this to a little bit of a color graded spooky level. Let's start with the white balance. I'm actually going to add some green tint into this because I think that's more of a kind of horror feel to it. Something like that just gives it a slight uneasy feeling. Right, we're not necessarily trying to keep it true to life with the white balance. I think we actually want to bring out a little bit of feeling using color in this way. And I might even, am I going to cool this down a little bit? Yeah, I think we'll try something like that. Add a bit more green, something like that. Okay, because it does actually start to play with the skin tones and stuff like that, which normally you wouldn't want to do. But in this case, it makes it feel a little bit uneasy, and I quite like that. Okay, let's do you know what? Let's bring the black levels down again, the shadows down. We can always sort of, play around with this a little bit. I want to make sure that this brighter area kind of coming across the screen here is the brightest area where we darken everything else a little bit. So, okay, that's looking pretty good. Maybe we'll bring the saturation down just a touch more. Let's come down to the tone curve where I think what we can do here is add a few points on. So I'm going to add one here. I'm going to add one in the middle as well. I don't want to play around with them too much. I'm actually going to bring that black point up a little bit just to give us a little bit of a faded look, and then bring the shadows down, crush the blacks a little bit. Something like that I think is looking pretty good. If I bring this point up a little bit, then we brighten the brighter areas even more. I think that's actually looking pretty good. I quite like the faded look for this. I think that works pretty well. If we come down to the hue, saturation, and luminance as well, I'm going to actually just bring the oranges down towards a sort of more burnt orange, because that's going to affect the skin tones here and make it feel, I think that looks actually pretty good. I'm going to bring the yellows, do you know what? I might leave those alone. We can play around a little bit, but I think that I might just leave those ones alone. The greens, though, I'm going to bring over towards the yellows because it's just going to help with this background being too green, right? The blues, I don't feel the need to change too much. I don't think there's a lot going on there. I might just bring that slightly over to the aqua. Otherwise, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's come back up to the tone curve where we've used the kind of point curve here, using sort of basically the exposure part of it. Let's go into some of the colors. Now, if we go into the red channel, what I'm going to do is actually bring this down towards the shadows, down towards kind of out of the red, so towards the sort of cyan. Look at that. That's really giving it very much a horror sort of vibe. If I bring that up a little bit, just to give us a bit of a curve there. Green, I'm actually going to just move that towards the green. Not too much, but something a little bit like that. Now we've gone, if I'm honest, pretty heavy on the color grade. Let's look at before and after. This is where the photo started. This is where we've got to. But definitely a very horror feeling to it, right? A pretty heavy color grade. Actually, I'm going to add in a couple more masks. So let's go ahead and do another radial gradient just over her face again, a little bit like that. I'm going to invert it again. I want to really darken things down a bit. I want to bring the black points down, something like that, just to make this even sort of darker. That's looking pretty good, I think. Before, after, I really like that. What I might do then is actually go in with a brush and actually just brush on over her eyes and certainly over this area here. Now she's got in, I think, contact lenses to make it a little bit more scary. But if I do that, I can bring the exposure up a little bit, maybe bring the clarity up a little bit, and we get this interesting effect. Normally, stuff like this would be way too much, but it's quite fun to play around with a sort of more Halloween-y feel because we can go a bit crazy with the edit, which is really fun. It's fun to be a bit creative with it, right? One more before and after. So this is before. This is where we started, straight out of camera. This is where we've got to. I'm pretty happy with that. I actually think this might be the one. This could be where we want to get to. We could try one radial gradient, something like this. We're not going to invert this one. I'm just going to bring the exposure up just a touch, just to bring out that skin, the eyes, and really make that the brightest area. Everywhere else is nice and dark. We've brought out the textures of this glass, I think it is, or something like that, that she's standing behind. We've got these kind of textures around here. Really like that. This is a really fun photo, actually. I think that's really brought home the atmosphere of it. Now, maybe this has gone way too far. I'd love to know where you would have stopped if you would have stopped a little bit earlier. We've used masks, we've used color grading, we've used the tone curve, which we don't often use when we're editing, or at least, you know, I don't often use that. And certainly in these videos, we haven't really used it that much. It's exciting to use some of these tools. There's so many tools available to us now in Lightroom Classic. It's such a useful thing. We've done, I think, a lot without ever having to do something like go to Photoshop. We've not had to use any AI stuff here. Just good old-fashioned photo editing. You love to see it. I'd love to know, though, like I say, where would you have stopped? Would you have stopped before this? Would you have gone further? Let me know in the comments. We've got loads of tutorials coming up every single Tuesday, loads of reviews, all the fun stuff you could ever want to see. So make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of that. Of course, I will see you in the next video. But until then, as always, thanks for watching.